Welcome back, and we're going into our closeout session for this afternoon and for our 2 days. We really appreciate those of you who have been with us throughout the whole program. And let me go to the next slide, what we're going to be able to cover. We want to do some further discussion in terms of golden nuggets from across today's sessions. Get some feedback from you in terms of your takeaways. And then we're going to, as I mentioned earlier, we'll have some time for some additional Q&A. And then we want to talk a little bit about some calls to action in terms of our follow-up from this program. If we'll go to the golden nuggets. And start out with our first, the next slide, with our first panel on the spectrum approaches to contract strategy. John or Sean or Bruce? Okay, well, let me cover since they're seem to be still
I just couldn't get my mute on there, and I didn't know you could pull me up.
Yeah.
So I won't look slick. But here we are. So yeah, it was a remarkable. I noticed in several of the groups how well the folks from the lean and the AWP camps were getting along, and how much agreement there was, and how much we seemed to genuinely enjoy working together. And that was the case with Bruce and I. And we came up that we had really, in our case, was really nothing that we had that was in contention. That this notion that the spectrum of contracting ranges, we had the same view from both perspectives, and that we both thought that the advantages of getting the actual performers there early far outweighed the benefits you would ever get from trying to get the competitive bids. And the other quick takeaway is just think about a NFL team. For one person draws up all the plays, and they practice the plays with somebody else, and then they bring in the real players to the game, give them that playbook, and say, go play football. You know, and that's kind of what we're trying to do in the traditional approach. It's just too complex. So it's there. It'll work. It's as you can make it as competitive as the fixed price agreement, and I hope that we see more of it.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next in terms of nuggets, how projects are planned. I know Dan is with us. If John or Fernando, you want to add something, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, early involvement of all the builders and designers using a multi-party contract was a big thing that I thought was a golden nugget. Using set-based design with target value delivery. Haven't really figured out how that works with AWP, but it certainly is super valuable in lean. The last planner system is one area where we can all hug each other, whether we're zebras or lions, because that really works. And AWP is using similar kinds of things. I think the last planner system is more robust and would bring great value. And respect for people is for all people.
Very good. Thank you. Fernando, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, sure. One of the big takeaways for me, as you can see, I kind of think of these teams, right? If we don't bring these teams together to drive effective collaboration, we really don't accomplish what we really like, and I think that's true in AWP and lean. So the focus on that development, whether you're talking about in a big room or a path of construction exercise, it's definitely a takeaway for me. Visual workspace, leveraging visual tools produces better solutions. Yeah. Clearly, I think that was a big takeaway. Both AWP and lean embrace that. Team co-location enables better decision makings. Again, it was the thought that, hey, your buyers are out in New Jersey somewhere, and you're here in Houston. It's tough, and I've seen a lot of effort to get people to the site locations. Some it's a little bit of a burden, and you know, hey, they're not used to being out of their design office and being inside a trailer. I think that's the fact that we can do that, and the team environments are enabled. So it's a pleasure rather than a burden, I think is key. And then identification of construction drivers. You know, what are you looking at? And I think more of it is around constraint management as well. So
Good, thank you. Let's move on to the project, how projects are executed. Actually, if you want to continue, Fernando, I know Robin's here, and I think Charles is still with us.
Yeah, well, I'll add a few things because I didn't get a chance to edit my part, but I think a couple of the big key golden nuggets for me was this constant talk about data attributions, you know, to data drive visualizations, data to do integration and supply chain procurement, right? So the idea of data as being a key is to me was a big takeaway. I really liked, and I see Charlie's got it too, the small batch. I liked the concept of that consistency. Let's break it down where people can understand it, because one of the mantras that I put in my own papers, that there's no super project manager in the world that could possibly understand the entirety of a project, right? It needs to get broken down to consumable chunks of work. So I'm a big believer in that. So at what level do you have to break it down so somebody's going to go do it, understands it? You know, that gets down to the installation work pack to me. Then the other thing I thought was a big takeaway was measurable value. We can talk about value, we can say all sorts of things, but how do we know it's really value to somebody? So that's the measurable value component that I think is worth exploring. One thing I do want to throw out kudos to Charlie. He brought up a term that I haven't seen in a long time, and that's agreement framework. AWP might be that, but an agreement framework. Oh my gosh, can we really, you know, formalize that and socialize that in the work that we do.
Great, Charlie or Robin, do you have anything to add?
I think Fernando encapsulated it well. Thank you, Bob. But yeah, no, he did a good job of summarizing. There was a lot of great takeaways, and it was a great discussion.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's move on, and we want to get some feedback from you all in the audience, and then after that, we'll do some questions. But first of all, what were your golden nuggets out of the entire day? We've done a little of that at the end of each session, but if you look at the summary of the entire day today, what would you say were the key takeaways for you and for your company as you go back into work tomorrow? So we'll do a word cloud as well. Just give us another minute. Okay, well, thank you for your input on that. We're going to ask one more question, and then we'll open it up for those questions you all still have for our panel members. And that is in terms of your overall satisfaction with our two-day program, or however much time you participated in. We'd like your feedback. Stephen's going to put that up in a second here.
And Bob, the results are hidden currently, so it's anonymous feedback.
Yes.
Okay.
And do you want to give them the choices?
Sure, it's actually a 5-star scale.
Okay, good.
$34 replies so far, still going.
Yeah, we'll let it go for a little bit longer, and then we'll get into the questions that are remaining. Okay, well, thank you for that feedback. What we'll do now is shift over to any outstanding questions. And I think some of these are obviously back to our previous panel. So I'll ask Fernando perhaps to help lead directing who'd like to address these questions. The first one I have is, I like the mapping of IWP against SWP. Is there something similar for EWPs, a detailed installation against process diagrams?
Yeah, I think if I understand this correctly, yes, there are, in fact, we have these relationship diagrams that relate EWPs that tie to other EWPs, construction work packages and other procurement work packages, because they're pretty much all integrated. And it does have a complex relationship. And all those eventually will tie to installation work packages that eventually tie to system work packages. You know, I could show some relationship diagrams if that would help clarify, if I think I'm answering the question correctly. Rob, I don't know if you want to add to that.
I think you're doing a great job of explaining it. The key is that the mapping is through the hierarchical development of the different packages. And typically that connection by the CWP and the execution at the field level comes into play with the EWP based on its mapping with the CWP. So we don't typically map an IWP to an EWP, but we do through attrition based on the CWP contents, right?
Right.
Okay. Great session. Any feedback from teams on the short interval production example regarding D-plan versus schedule software?
Yeah, I'll start out with that one. Yeah, one definitely should complement the other, right? But there are two different types of tools. The schedule in our practice, at least the way I like to think of it, it should not be detailed to the level of IWPs. You know, there are exceptions, of course, And they should be managed because those should be managed in short range plans, because that's what separates project management from production management. IWPs are meant to go get work done, right? So that's where the value is added. Yeah, here are virtual tools and data integration, data management is highly valuable. But if, those details really should not be in the schedule, but they should be tying to CWP milestones. So a string of IWPs and their completion should be tied somewhere along the way to a CWP, so we know that our schedules are still holding. And if you do have all the information in your schedule, you're really not managing production. The schedule's managing your behaviors, and that's one thing we're trying to avoid. I don't know if Charlie or Robin want to add to that, right? Because I know the last planner system is really tries to shun the fact that stay away from detailed schedules, build the detail as you get closer to the work, and I think that's what short range planning is trying to do. And there's different methodologies, different tools to support that.
Now, my only input would be that we kind of violently disagree with plan the details closer to the work. The opportunities come too late, so we are rapidly transitioning to one, details embedded in offsite and prefabricated solutions, but then two, take the concept of weekly work planning, but create your weekly work plans within a TAC framework before the work starts, so that we can get flow, stability, and balance.
Yeah, so you're saying upfront planning, and then things will drop into a look ahead, or to manage that final production, or you're saying you're going to manage that final production?
Well, one of the values with TACT and the work step to work package to weekly CAR planning is you're doing this highly detailed data-rich planning, but you get this replication benefit. Yes, you have to adjust, for other sizes, constraints, but so it's not, you get the level, 5 and perhaps beyond detail, but it replicates, so you're not having to do it for every week. And then you're able to manage, and then the other thing, as you progress, the amount of controls type data that comes along for the ride with a TAC car is tremendous. And it's that reusable actual production capture data that a lot of the last planner platforms and methodologies with tools miss, that we get with TACT in a more data-rich environment.
Yeah, data-rich is the key there, I think.
Yeah.
Dan, looks like Dan wants to add some
Well,
comments.
there was a time when short interval production schedules in Excel were not all that elegant, and I've been involved in projects where we introduced last planner to replace them and double productivity. What I think we're talking about here is a short interval production schedule that is TAC planning, that is the trains that roll through here, that is done very smartly. And when that's the case, then I'm all on board the train. Sorry, I went a little far with that, but you get the idea.
Okay. Next question really is one that was actually asked and covered a little bit in yesterday's session. How many CWPs per CWA? One of you want to
Robin,
field that?
You want to answer that one, Robin?
Sure, that's an interesting question. At a risk of sounding like the Canadian Prime Minister, that the budget will balance itself. The truth is that when you look at a CWA, you're identifying a CWA based on a process area and a logical geographical containment of work tasks that makes sense to be grouped together. Whether it's going to be designed together, engineered together, constructed together kind of thing. Your CWA development is going to denote really the amount of CWPs. Because the first thing you do post CWA development, when you start moving towards POC2 down towards into your detail engineering, is you're going to be identifying the CWPs per CWA to answer this question. Those CWPs per CWA, the first thing is by discipline. And as soon as you break a CWA up into its disciplines, then you got a number of CWPs. Sometimes the CWPs are still larger than you'd like, so you're going to break those CWPs down a little bit further. So you might have 2 or 3 or 10 CWPs for a single discipline based on the size of that particular commodity in that area. So there's no devout ratio on that aspect, or I'm not going to give you number of hours to break it down by. It's going to be based on scope and how that CWA was identified. You can have a CWA that's basically just a buried duct bank for electrical, and that CWA may only have 4,000 hours and only have 2 CWPs associated with it. Or you could have a CWA that's a process area for a hydrocracker, and that particular cracker unit's going to have 30,000 hours worth of piping, and you may have, you know, multiple different types of packages. So there's no real one rule of thumb, but it's, think about the scope of the CWA, and then it's going to denote how you break it down.
Yeah, I'm going to jump to 2 questions down because since we're talking about CWPs now, what about systems SWPs that are in more than one CWP?
Well, I'm going to hopefully pass that one down to one of our experts from earlier in the day that was on the actual RT364. I'm running through scissors through that report right now, trying to implement it into my daily life, so to speak. So if there's somebody else that can answer it. Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, I was distracted there, so apologies. Which question are we on?
No worries. It was just the first
What about
one.
SWPs that are in more than one CWP?
So what I would say to that, unless we get a taker from the 364 group, is that there should be no crossing boundaries of CWPs by an SWP typically. CWPs should, if you're going to break them, you should break them along that system extents boundary within the SWP. Remember, an SWP is not the entire system, right? The entire system is a different system designation. The system work package is how that small grouping of the system is going to be turned over. So try to avoid crossing any CWP boundaries with an SWP, because remember, CWPs, we adopted them in AWP, and where did CWP come from to start with? The CWP was really a contractual boundary of work. And if you look at a CWP as a contractual scope, you're certainly not going to put a SWP across multiple CWPs, right? That's my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I didn't butcher it too bad.
Now let's go to the next one. If I understand correctly, system work packages are basically used for testing. Is that understanding correct? Or do you also define separate test work packages?
Well, I think a CWP is generally follows along test boundaries based on easily identifiable flange to flange type boundaries within a system. They could be one-to-one with test packs, not always one-to-one with test packs, because if the reason why I say no, not one-to-one, because I may put multiple SWPs into a test pack. And if you work in Northern Canada, like I have as a tradesman for most of my career, we do a lot of test cascading, meaning we will do tests across multiple systems based on the same commodities and test parameters. Because pumping glycol, moving glycol, and those types of things like we use in the winter up here is very expensive. So we may have multiple test extents or SWPs into one test. So they follow boundaries, which typically are identified by flanges, which are often in place because of testing. But you know, it's not always logical following those exact same boundaries. So test work packages may contain more than one SWP, and it typically a really productive test package definitely will.
Okay. What's the role and responsibilities of the AWP champion in a project?
All right, I'll go ahead and take this one. You know, and you heard several people talk about their role as an AWP champion. So on the project, you always need someone to promote AWP, right? Not everybody's going to want to behave the same way, and you also, you know, need someone to understand what it is or know how to or knows how to drive a process, or just make sure that if things get out of line, they can be escalated. So in my mind, there can be multiple champions, but for a project, you really want somebody that's going to give some oversight to the program and keep it on track, in line, as necessary.
Okay, I'm going to skip over the one below because I want to come back as the last question. But AWP has many defined parts as of the practice. It is common to have dedicated lean process people on projects similar in members to AWP implementations.
Is it common to have dedicated lean process people on projects similar in numbers to AWP implementations?
Right.
I think that's a different question, yeah, because AWP does have defined roles. You'll talk about AWP coordinators, champions, workplace planners, workplace planning coordinators, right? So there are these roles, and on the lean side, I think that's the question here. Do we see those types of folks? I've in the projects that I've been involved with, there are lean coaches that typically will get involved. There are dedicated, I would say, last planner technicians that manage those complex type process maps that you looked at, those sticky walls, right? If you're going to put it into a virtual environment, right? So I think part of the goal is that these last planners are people that are already at the work front, right? They're the foreman, they're the general foreman, and things like that. So is there a lean champion? There usually is somewhere. Somebody's got to at the executive level needs to champion it, just like an AWP champion. And Dan, I don't know if you're still on, but I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, every A3 has a champion, the A3 champion, who guides the development of it, and they have a mentor. You're right about last planner. What we like to do is encourage young engineers, PEs or something, to be the champion of the process for the last planner system. And within organizations, it is becoming increasingly common for there to be a lean champion in a division or an office or on a project. So the answer is yes. I think it's probably not as formalized as the AWP champion, but yes.
Perfect.
One of the other questions is lean seems to be like the Agile method. Is that everybody else's perception?
There's a lot of similarity between Agile and lean. And Agile tends to be more toward software kinds of things, whereas lean is broader and more toward, in this case, design and construction. Some of the areas they meet up are in the use of Scrum. Both Agile and lean use Scrum, which is a practice that includes the Kanban boards and 2-week increments of work. Very common in software development and very common in design. So yes, a lot of vibing there going on.
Right, in the sense that you're responding to change and replanning your work. I think there's definitely a parallel with that concept with lean.
Yep.
Jumping down, what is your point of view to implement the methodology during the construction phase? Any issues?
Excellent question. I assume that's from both the lean side and the AWP side.
I have a feeling it is.
I'll take it from the AWP side to start with. I would say the first half of my career as an AWP consultant, I was a smoke jumper. And what that means is I was pretty much flying around the world into projects that were already underway and in trouble to bring AWP type methodologies. Obviously, you're not going to get all the benefit that AWP can bring if you're bringing it into the construction phase. And let's be honest, if you're bringing it into the construction phase, you're not doing AWP at all. That's work phase planning, because that's the execution aspect of AWP is work phase planning. But still, there's benefit to it. I don't want to say it's never too late. There's benefit to it, but obviously bring it forward, because data is not going to be aligned the way you want it. You're not going to have budgets in place for the proper amount of people you're going to require in the planning. The organization's not going to be set up. Your project's not going to be organized by a proper WBS structure to satisfy a typical AWP structure. There's going to be lots of hurdles that you're going to try to overcome by coming into the construction phase and spend a lot of energy trying to get there. Is there benefit? Yes, there's benefit, but is there more benefit in bringing in a construction expert to help you get your project back online, as much as bringing in AWP methodologies, or, like I say at that point, work phase planning methodologies? I wouldn't set your sights as that's the point we want to implement. We'll put it that way, but there is benefit. Issues, many. I've cited many of them. So,
yeah, and I would agree that, you know, if that is your option, that you are starting a project and you want to bring lean or you want to bring AWP in during the construction phase, do it. You know, my early days on the lean side, I mean, again, what Robin said, it was smoke jumping, and a project's in trouble, and you bring in these methodologies. In this case, you know, was lean thinking, lean processes, I should say, and it immediately starts this discipline in production planning that calms the waters, and all of a sudden you go from way behind and threatening to blow budgets to, hey, now I'm ahead of schedule, and you know, I'm going to meet my budgets, right? So things start happening because you're trying to take what you're given in terms of engineering and design and make reliable work out of it. And you know, one of the early jobs it was actually a hospital job here for one of the early teams in Sutter Health back in the day. You know, we were given, oh, here's all the drawings, all the details and everything else, and you know, we've already vetted it out and made it perfect, and on and on. So the first thing we did, we started building virtual models, and this is back in the early days where we were using manufacturing level tools. And immediately you found out that, you know, things just wouldn't work. But we would go around now, what the architect in this case said, oh, these are like virtual RFIs. We'll call them VRFIs. And it changed the behavior. They started getting engaged because they were able to visualize the problem. And the construction team was able to express it and see it and come up with a plan well ahead of having to go do the work, right? They didn't discover in the field, but they put a plan together based on what information they had, and that was the benefit. So yeah, whether it's lean and ADP is the same way, like Robin said, if those are the cards you're dealt with, you know, don't go out there and just beat your head against the wall and hope that a claim or a lawsuit's going to save you, because that's a lose-lose. You know, in this case, sort out what you got, make it reliable, and communicate it well ahead of time through the in ADP through the constraint management process. Then you'll get win-wins.
yeah, I think the key to both our answers there is, sure, bring it in if you're in trouble and you're in the last phase, but don't make that your target. That's not intent. That's
going that way.
That's a gap stop, right?
Right.
Yeah, let me go into another one. Could you guys talk about what are the requirements as long as platform hardware matters to implement AWP methodology?
What are the requirements as long as platform?
The question.
I think it's asking, you know, if you're going to bring in, if you have platform hardware, you know, does it matter? Does it actually help implementing advanced work packaging? And you know, depends on the complexity of the project, of course. But from my perspective, if that's what the question is, and maybe it needs to be clarified a little bit. But yes, hardware and software, these software platforms that are coming out now do go a long way, because as Robin had brought up earlier, these visualization techniques, right? You can't do that without software and hardware, because you don't want the software to drive you, the tools to drive you. You know, you want its ability to put information in front of you so you can make better decisions, you know, is kind of the key, and that's what it does. And you saw Charlie run through a simulation earlier to test things, right? First run studies. you got to do that with hardware. I mean, with software. And if that's, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Robin, but that's the way I took that question.
I think that's the general basis, and I think I think it's also leading to the level of how bad do you need software and such to implement AWP. I would go as far as to say, I mean, the mantra in the industry is you don't need it, but if you're planning to do it, you're going to need an army without software. But let's really break it down to the truth. If you're not using some type of visualization software, and if you consider basic Microsoft tools still a software implementation, you need at least that basics, right? If you're going to do AWP without any software, I mean, nobody's doing pen and paper anymore, let's be honest, right? So when we say software platform, I assume we meant purpose-built beyond a Microsoft suite, type situation. So if we say beyond a Microsoft suite, small projects, some shutdown turnarounds, I've done them myself with Excel and some basic tools, but it's painful and it's not by choice. We'll put it that way. Don't ever make that a choice. If you have the choice to choose technology, do it. Is really the key to that. Is it an absolute requirement of AWP? To a point, yes. I would say, and go on record as saying that, but is it an absolute mandate that you go with a juggernaut like the big beasts? Not on all projects.
Yeah, there's a lot of good lightweight tools out there, right? Well, a lot of lightweight tools that just do the job, right?
Exactly. Sometimes basic tools will help you as much as going with one of the basic platforms that you'll implement on giga projects and such. But
Okay, let me go to just 3 more questions and then we'll move to the next segment. Do you still implement construction readiness and when using AWP or Lean?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's all about readiness, right? So when you think about any package, again, I mentioned it earlier in the day, that you don't want to release any work, in this case, a work package, a construction work package, or an installation package downstream to anybody that's going to do further work on it. So yes, is that construction work package ready to be given to the workplace planners and workplace planning managers to break it into IWPs or vet out the IWPs and make sure that they're ready? And when those IWPs become ready, that all the constraints have been removed and they can give it to a crew, and the crew doesn't have to scratch their head and say, well, gee, I'm missing materials, I'm missing, I didn't have that crane, I didn't have this or that, right? That's not readiness. So there's make-ready activities for the installation work package that is that final step that gets released to the crew to actually drop it into their short-range plans and go plan and coordinate and do all the things that a good foreman really wants to do, and execute the work itself. So that last bit of readiness in that 3 or 4 week look ahead is the weekly work plan. People confirming that they can do bits of that work, right? So there's the constant readiness conditions need to be met if we're going to have success. So it's absolutely, in my mind, the mantra. And how do you gain readiness? That of course is something that AWP has really excelled in my mind.
Okay, so the last 2 questions I'm going to cover here. What are the next steps? I'd like to identify a lean organization who wants to start AWP. Your thoughts, folks?
Well, I think that's the whole goal and why we got that joint working group together. We have a lot of great people, and I know that I'll tell you right now. You heard a couple of them. IPD for one is looking to apply AWP, on their project. In fact, they stated so yesterday. So they want to bring it to some of their owner groups that they're working with, and so IPD has been one of our partners for a while because of that interest. They really want to understand it. So I think there are people that there's one that I'll tell you that was right on the phone.
Nick Massey and I were talking offline that this would really be something we could just start to develop. Let's just find somebody who wants to do it and let's do it.
Yeah. So definitely, that's the joint working group. We're bringing all these people in. We're exploring how this could be applied to these different projects. And that's one of the goals. And that's why we want to get that white paper out before the end of the year, because it will highlight the best practices and how we can apply it in these different project conditions.
So that leads us to the last one at the bottom there. Great summit. Excellent work. Any chance of the AWP and lead white paper or CII research team to map it?
Funny enough, you just mentioned it, for Fernando. You want to talk about the joint working group that you're the chair of? I think that's very.
Yes, I mean that is our goal. We do want to get that white paper, out there, and the folks that really want to, be part of that joint working group to help write that white paper. A lot of great conversations, and a lot of folks on these that have been sitting in panels these last 2 days have been contributing to it. And I think our ultimate goal is really to get out this paper so it can become the basis of funded research, at some point.
Right.
So that's the goal.
And CII has as one of its 4 major collaborative areas taking serious work at continuing to advance AWP. So that research may fit well within that coming up. Before we go to our closeout thank yous, I do want to point out some upcoming opportunities. And I'm going to ask Rebecca Snelling to join us and share the first one, which relates to the Lean Institute.
Thanks, Bob. So next slide, please. We have upcoming our 23rd Annual Lean Construction Institute Congress. It is our conference that we have every year in October, and it's just a couple of weeks away now. And if you use this discount code that you see on the screen, AWP100, at the checkout, you'll get a $100 discount. We'd love to have you join us.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to do that. I mean, I've been involved with several of these, and you'll really get an appreciation for what's really going on in the lean world. So thank you. Appreciate it, Rebecca.
Absolutely.
Okay, if we go to the next, Lloyd, do you want to talk about the
Sorry, Robert. Bob,
the conference?
Can I bring
sure.
it back for just a minute?
Sure.
On a personal curious note that I'm sure everybody is, with the COVID thing as an influence, that Lean Summit coming, is there a virtual content to it, or is it only in person?
That's a great question. There are a number of precautions being taken around COVID, but it is only going to be in person. Now, something coming up, and LCI has not started advertising it yet. They don't want to create a lot of confusion, but there will be a one-day event virtual in November that will consist of a number of the keynotes and things like that that are from the in-person conference.
Good question.
Very good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Lloyd, do you want to talk about the conference coming up in Houston?
Yeah, we have the AWP conference coming up in, well, it's actually not in Houston. It's virtual now.
Virtual, right.
So it's going to be the North American conference. And we have probably close to 100 speakers between track speakers and plenary speakers. We're doing the first awards at the event this year. We'll be handing out 2 personal awards, and we'll be handing out the criteria for the project-based awards. The website is now operational and registrations are available, but we've been doing the event now for a number of years, and this is probably the most practitioner-focused conference that we've had, because now everybody's past the gee, should I, to how do I, and that's what the focus is now. It's how do you build discipline-specific packages? How do you get the involvement of the decision makers? How do you deal with data-related issues? So a lot of things that you've heard touched upon at the summit, you'll really get to dig into them and get to know more. So we're hoping to see you all there, and looking forward to continuing the conversations. I do have one question for Fernando, though. I'm actually part of the Lean and AWP joint working group, and I know you're getting into the white paper. Are you looking for new members for the joint working group, or are we filled up now?
No, as I mentioned, if those that want to get involved are certainly welcome to help in shaping that white paper, exploring other topics. So it's been good. No, we're always looking for new members. Appreciate that.
And if we go to the next, we just want to flag where you can go to the CII website. If you click on resources, and if you go to the next slide, it will take you down there on AWP overview. You can have access to looking at a number of pieces of things that we're working on. Obviously, AWP CBA is open just to CII members, but we do have a number of opportunities in terms of materials to the outside. And if you go to the next, here's a video. Might want to copy it down. That's on YouTube that talks about AWP resources. And with that, we'd like to close out with our thank you. I'd like to, Rebecca, do you want to start out with your comments and thoughts? Go to the next slide.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bob. Just wanted to say thank you to all of our speakers that we've had in the past 2 days with us. There's been a lot of great information, a lot of good energy, a lot of good synergy shared, and we appreciate everybody's time and investment in helping make this possible.
Okay, and we definitely echo the same. These are the speakers you've heard, and good opportunity when we have the recording going that you can go back and revisit them. These are today's speakers. You can keep going. And these, of course, are thought leaders and the work that they did behind the scenes putting this together. And if you go to the next, we want to thank you for the program developers and presenters again. And then lastly, we have our thank you to the summit sponsors. We hope that a number of you did go to their virtual sites during some of the breaks or during some of the program and had an opportunity to interact. We think that this is maybe the beginning of some future collaborative efforts with the Lean Construction Institute. So we'll keep you posted in terms of when we do something similar in the near future. Great opportunity. I thought it was very telling that as we went through the last polls we ran, that there was a lot more understanding and people's interest in making use of AWP or making use of Lean than when we first ran the same questions earlier in the day. So we want to thank you all, appreciate your time, and please do get back in touch with us if you have any further questions. Have a good evening. Take care.